When all is said and done, a W is a W and history generally won't remember the details, and the fighter who got their hand raised is what counts. And really, when it comes to bonus money, title belts and rankings, moral victories just don't exist. But with that being said, it wouldn't exactly be fair to paint all victories with the same brush. There are plenty of times that a fighter just has the best showing possible or some huge advantage in a few areas of the fight en route to a clear-cut showcase win. And then there are those times when the winner is forced to walk through an absolute fire. Sometimes the winner has to go through some personal version of hell to experience triumph. So this is a tribute to all of those men and women who didn't go down easy. I'm Tom from MMA On Point, and here are 10 fighters who managed to brutalize their victors. Number 10, Jorge Masvidal versus DEMIAN MAIA. While the BMF title doesn't really mean anything, it did at least allow Jorge Masvidal to finally have something for his trophy case. Before his sudden rise to MMA folklore, Gamebred was an underappreciated perennial contender who gave the toughest fights to the best in the world, but was consistently lacking a single 10-9 from a judge to break his split decision curse and climb the ladder to the top. And he consistently had one of the best fade haircuts in the goddamn game. But look no further than his showing against DEMIAN MAIA at UFC 211 as evidence. At the time, Maia's incredible Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills guided him on a 6-fight winning streak, including a quick finish of former belt holder Carlos Condit. But the eventual reality show star made Maia pay for almost every moment that his suffocating grappling wasn't on display. After dominating position and controlling Masvidal throughout the first, the round closed with Maia eating some serious ground and pound shots after failing on a rear naked choke from a standing body triangle. The first half of the second featured Gamebred taking a classic sprawl and brawl approach, stuffing the takedown attempts and landing a variety of strikes. And in a familiar scene for Masvidal, only one of the 3 judges thought he did enough for the W, putting him on the wrong side of a split decision. Number 9, Martin Kampmann versus Diego Sanchez. If there's one thing you can almost guarantee when Diego Sanchez enters the cage, it's that there will be a lot of goddamn blood. Lots and lots of blood.
So much blood!
And against the underrated Martin Kampmann, this would certainly prove true, as the two would meet for the main event of UFC on Versus 3 for a absolutely gruesome war of attrition. As the talented kickboxer landed shot after shot, the perpetually possessed Sanchez kept on the offense, ready to receive more punishment and of course return the favor as much as he could. The original tough winner earned the nod from all 3 judges, standing as one of the more controversial decisions in the modern era, but if damage were the only thing to consider, Kampmann would have won in an absolute landslide. And while Kampmann himself certainly looked like he had been in an absolute war, it was Sanchez who looked like an extra in The Walking Dead. Even with the stats and many observers thinking the Hitman should have gotten the nod, Sanchez took home the win and likely spent weeks without anyone recognizing him through the mask of bruises and swelling.
You look like somebody turned your face inside out and then just left it like that, but then you got in a house fire. God!
Number 8, Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade 1. When the main event began at UFC 237, it looked like a walk in the park for strawweight champion Rose Namajunas. Despite being in hostile territory against the extraordinarily powerful Brazilian Jessica Andrade, the crowd in Rio, yep, you remember crowds, good old days, bore witness to a striking clinic from the champ. With a masterful use of feints and a textbook jab and combination striking, she quickly busted up the challenger. The lone moments that Andrade presented a threat were the aggressive single leg takedowns that she attempted to transform into slams. Even then, Thug Rose maintained control and nearly locked in submissions to counter. Through the first round and a half, it was shaping up to be one of those more technical dominant performances for a champ in recent memory. And then Andrade successfully turned another takedown attempt into a forceful slam. The moment Rose landed on her neck, she was out cold, no longer the queen of the strawweight division. The slam was so horrendous afterwards, Thug Rose, who had previously dealt with a serious neck injury, openly contemplated leaving the sport behind and living out her days like Thanos post-snap as a farmer, but she would ultimately return to competition a year later and avenge the loss to Andrade via split decision. Number 7, Gray Maynard versus Frankie Edgar 3. Without a doubt, the main event between Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard at UFC 125 was one of the best fights in history, a back and forth war that featured the lightweight champion pushed to the absolute brink and coming back to secure his belt with a draw. It was just unforgettable. And with a less than decisive outcome, it made sense to run it back. And so the stage was set for UFC 136, and while expectations were understandably high, there was no way we'd see anything as amazing as the last time these two guys met. Right? Well, in a near mirror image of Edgar's troubled beginnings in their previous opening round, Maynard pounced on the champion like a madman. While Edgar flailing and falling all over the cage, it seemed like a matter of time before the bigger and more powerful challenger would finish what he started this time. But with a badly busted and bloodied nose, Edgar found a way to persevere yet again. However, this time Edgar wouldn't just find a way to survive and cling onto his belt, he would definitively close the book on their rivalry, as after eating a salvo of punches, Maynard was saved by Josh Rosenthal, and for a second time in a row he battered the champion, but fell short of capturing the title. Number 6, Douglas Lima versus Rory McDonald and Gegard Mousasi. There's just no way to minimize the danger standing in front of you when the guy standing in front of you is Douglas Lima. Typically, if you find yourself locked in there with him, you won't be the same when it's over, especially with highlight reel moments against the likes of Andrei Koreshkov twice, Ben Saunders, and MVP being the most jarring examples. While those wins among others have cemented his place among Bellator's all-time great talents, the absolute destruction applied to those who actually beat him definitely deserves a mention here too. When former UFC title challenger Rory McDonald took the crown from Lima at Bellator 192, it came at a pretty high price. While the Red King was able to wrestle his way to a decision, he had to endure a generous helping of leg kicks in the process. In fact, by the time they reached the final and ultimately decisive round, McDonald's leg was just grotesquely battered as a massive hematoma formed. The new champion's lead leg was so compromised he couldn't walk out under his own power and actually had to be carried out. And just recently, Lima reminded everyone how dangerous his kicks can be against Gegard Mousasi at Bellator 250. Moving up the scale for a chance at the vacant middleweight belt, the larger man earned a clear-cut decision. However, Lima managed to chop him down plenty in the process as well. Number 5, Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir 1. For all of the MMA purists out there, the entrance of Brock Lesnar into the UFC was a particularly polarizing time. Despite his background as a Division I NCAA champion wrestler, it was his background as a champion in scripted professional wrestling that made some fans roll their eyeballs and wait to see him get humbled by a real fighter. Undoubtedly, they were all smiles upon learning that former heavyweight champion Frank Mir would be the one to welcome Lesnar to the octagon at UFC 81. With his submission prowess and comfort level fighting off his back, it was a potential landmine for the man that the UFC hoped to ride to more mainstream success. And those diehards must have nearly had a goddamn heart attack when Lesnar almost immediately took Mir down and started battering him from half guard. If it wasn't for Steve Mazzagatti jumping in to deduct a point for a blow to the back of the head in one of the more questionable moments in a very questionable career, it's very likely Lesnar would have continued pounding Mir's head into the ground. Instead, the reset set the stage for Mir to show off those aforementioned submission skills, and with Lesnar getting too comfortable in the guard, he opened himself up to that famous footlock. Number 4, Anderson Silva and Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping. After being overwhelmed by Luke Rockhold at UFC Fight Night 55, it looked like the book was written on Michael Bisping, a proven tough competitor who was just barely on the outskirts of the middleweight creme de la creme. But his improbable resurgence that saw him capture the previously elusive top honors in the division was incredible to witness and notoriously hard fought. And at UFC Fight Night 84, he'd be booked opposite all-time great Anderson Silva in front of us UK fans, and that night Bisping would fulfill a career-long dream by beating the long-time champ. But the Spider left Bisping's face badly damaged for his troubles in one of the best post-championship performances. This included an incredible sequence with Silva landing a flying knee which appeared to KO Bisping as the 4th round ended. Silva even celebrated on the fence thinking he had won. After avenging the rock-hard loss and winning the title in his next bout, at his first title defense against Dan Henderson at UFC 204, he'd avenge another tough loss. But while Bisping controlled long stretches of the clock, Hendo kept finding a home for his signature H-bomb and scared the UK crowd yet again. And just like with Silva, Bisping would celebrate the win, but with a badly battle-worn face. Number 3, Anderson Silva versus Yushin Okami 1. As UFC 134 approached, a casual fan might have been more intrigued by the main event between Anderson Silva and Yushin Okami than you well-informed maniacs out there. Because a huge part of the promotion for the event highlighted the fact that the Spider had only been defeated once in 6 years prior. And that loss was at the hands of the challenger Okami. But what that simple narrative fails to mention is how that loss actually came about. When the two first stood across from one another at the famed Rumble on the Rock tournament, it began just like the vintage performances that would make the bulk of his legendary UFC title run. Silva just had his way with Okami, using a far superior striking game, and when Okami found an opportunity to employ his wrestling game, his offense was just largely negated by the Spider's dangerous guard. And then, seconds later, it was over, as Silva used a tricky up kick to knock out Okami. The only problem was that that kick was illegal, as Okami was a downed opponent, even though he had top position. So with Okami unable to continue, Silva was disqualified. It's a win that only would be rivaled by that of Matt Hamill over John Jones, but of course in their rematch, Silva would again dominate, TKOing the challenger in the second. Number 2, Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. After waiting years for it to happen, former Bellator and One Championship welterweight champion Ben Askren was set to make his debut in the octagon at UFC 235. And even though he called out almost everyone at the top of the 170-pound division, he was paired with the one person he didn't target, the violent demigod that is Robbie Lawler. And within 15 seconds of the opening bell, Lawler would unleash absolute disaster on Askren after a failed takedown attempt from the decorated wrestler set up a thunderous slam with only that sweet curly throw to cushion the fall. Lawler was just absolutely merciless, unloading a barrage of bombs that sent blood pouring and had Herb Dean just a nanosecond away from stopping the bout. But somehow, some way, Askren survived and continued with the game plan. And soon afterwards, Lawler was caught in a bulldog choke and dropped his arm, which made Dean think he went limp for a second for the most controversial stoppages in the sport's history. And while the calls for a rematch were loud and completely justified, Askren was just having absolutely none of it. So sporting a freshly swollen and busted face at the post-fight press conference, the jovial victor was already back to targeting the other welterweights on the roster. And number 1, Johny Hendricks versus GSP. After avenging his upset loss to Matt Serra, George St-Pierre seemed nearly invincible. With 8 successful defenses of the undisputed welterweight title under his belt and the who's who of great fighters on his resume, the only challenge left for him was the elusive Anderson Silva super fight. However, enter Johny Hendricks. With 2 NCAA wrestling titles and frightening knockout power, the rising star seemed to have the necessary ingredients on paper to pull off the impossible. And at UFC 167, he would give GSP all he could handle. While he previously had no trouble putting opponents on their backs, including Josh Koscheck, who was also an NCAA champion, Hendricks' ability to deny the takedowns forced GSP to deal with his powerful punches. The challenger managed to rock St-Pierre, score his own takedowns, and drag him into a brutal dogfight. And as the fight came to a close, there was a genuine feeling that the possible greatest fighter of all time was just dethroned. Every media scorecard recorded for the bout went in favour of Hendricks, but only one of the judges agreed, and afterwards a battered and exhausted GSP decided to pass up on the obvious immediate rematch and go on a 4-year leave of absence from MMA. Thanks so much to Anthony Walker for writing this list. You can go follow him at AntWalkerMMA. And thanks so much to Max Randall for editing it. You can follow him at Max_Randall. Also, thanks so much to the man Ben Rosette, composer of the intro music. Please go check out his music by clicking the link in the description below and catch the latest updates on his Instagram and Twitter page at Ben Rosette. Thanks for watching that video. Please do like and subscribe. We upload 3 jaw-droppingly juicy MMA videos a week to get your teeth into, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to follow us at OnPointMMA and Tom A. Ransom on Twitter, and you make sure you have a great day.